Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee time for Monday, September the 28th. Beginning a new week, at least abiding by common conventions here. How is everyone this morning? Arriving here at Monday concludes a busy 7 days, and looking over my calendar this morning, there's still a fair bit going on this week, but not as much as last week, and most of it happening at saner hours of the day. So we had a lovely weekend after some of our first good rain. The forecast worked out quite well for us. And we had people gathering at the Hermitage Saturday and Sunday to help us out with our annual Woodchuckers Ball, which is the playful name I gave to a community work day we do, where people can come out and help the monks finish off the preparations for cordwood, firewood for the winter time. And normally we have community gatherings once a month so that people can come together and be on site here at the Hermitage and be with each other and help for a couple hours, take care of some of the groundskeeping tasks, forest work, garden work, a lot of the stuff that the monks can't do because of their monastic discipline and rules. But also with just 3 monks here, sometimes it's good to have a little help from your friends. And that old adage, many hands make light work, played out very nicely on Saturday. So the weather cooperated. There was little sprinkles at mealtime, but by the mealtime was over, the sun was out. And we had probably 20 people show up on Saturday. Lots of old friends, people that hadn't seen each other for a while. And with the fresh air and the space and sunlight and breeze and masks, I don't think it was a super spreader event. I think it was quite safe, wholesome, and uplifting. I know myself, I just felt real delighted to have people be able to come here. It's been a very strange and long year, and it was nice to have such a big turnout. And things went really quickly. I was afraid we'd run out of work for Sunday, but we probably got 80% of everything done on Saturday. And then Sunday we had a smaller kind of group of people and finished off everything quite easily. So, and somebody was asking me in the chat before we got started here how it came out. And my reply was, better than I expected in every way. The weather was nicer, it was more fun, more people came, more work got done. We have more wood than I expected. We moved almost twice as much as I thought we would. So we probably have 2 to 3 years of wood now down by the Hermitage house where we use it. So, and then some new stuff curing on the upper part of the property. So for everyone, and I see several people in here this morning, in the chat at least. I don't know who else is watching live, but several people in the chat who came out for the weekend to help out. So thank you all. The Sangha really appreciated that. And It was a good time. My muscles are a little bit sore. So the Buddha encourages us to be unburdened with duties, few in duties, sometimes translated light duties. So with the firewood moved, hopefully we can move on to lighter duties this week and get a little bit more silence and simplicity back into my week. The end of the week on Friday will mark the end of the Vassa period. So this is a big part of the Buddhist calendar, dating back to the time of the Buddha. The lay people asked the Buddha to lay down rules for the monastics to stay put and live in one place through the monsoon season, primarily so they wouldn't have to worry about them traveling in dangerous weather. They didn't have as much control over the rivers back then, so and also it was a time of year where they were planting crops and keeping the monks from traipsing across farmland and destroying crops, I guess was maybe part of it. But ever since that time, it's been part of our monastic discipline to stay put. In the monsoon season or the Vassa, the rainy season, at least the rainy season as it exists in Asia, South Asia. So, and to keep our calendars kind of harmonized, we abide by that, even though it's really not the rainy season. The winter time here is our rainy season and sketchy weather season. But since we have a worldwide network of monasteries and we're all coordinated around the traditional calendar. So at the conclusion of that on Friday, monastic seasons are shifting for us as well as moving into fall. And Ajahn Sudanto and Tanrakito, as I've mentioned, be preparing to head south to our home monastery of Abaigiri on Saturday. So change. I can see my mind already now that we're less than 7 days away from that, starting to want to think and imagine and image new realities. Part of my habit is to start wondering if there's anything I need to worry about. Things are going to change. Is there anything I need to worry about? And even absent identifying something to worry about, the tendency is for a bit of anxiety to start exercising itself, just knowing that change is coming. Which I suppose in a worldly sense, and thinking about the animal realm and the nature of the human body being close to the animal realm, I guess that makes sense. in the realm of Dhamma, or in light of Dhamma, things are always changing. So it makes no sense at all. It's somewhat arbitrary, chunking time like this and this and this. Calling Monday the beginning of a week. It's true in the conventional sense. And it's even true, I guess, on some sense, in terms of physics. I mean, our calendar hasn't been completely fabricated out of nothing whatsoever. But there's no ultimate truth to Monday. It is just a convention. Even my calendar software sort of asks me what day of the week it wants me to start on. I think it's Sunday or Monday. Do you want your weeks to start on Sunday, or do you want your weeks to start on Monday? But it's interesting just to reflect on these habits we have, these emotional habits we have in particular. Anxiety has been a big teacher for me, if I want to put some positive spin on it. And it's quite interesting to notice how some of these emotional patterns and habits that we have don't necessarily need objects to arise. There's well-practiced habits. They don't come out of nowhere. There are causes and conditions. And it's not me, not mine, but there are causes and conditions for these things. But it's very curious that we can feel anxiety without any conscious or discrete object of worry. Sometimes we notice other sort of emotional habits playing themselves in this way too, like anger in particular, frustration, anger, negativity, depression. I've seen it in myself. I've seen it in other people. In the community dynamic, it seems quite apparent to me sometimes, watching some of my community members, my brothers. Somebody has a particular habit of being angry or frustrated with another community member, even to the point where one images and would wish for them not to be there, and fall into the fantasy that somehow life would be better, happier, more complete. Somehow the frustration and anger would go away once that person is fired or once that person leaves. And then that person leaves and they just find a new object. They replace them with a new frustration, a new source of anger, a new least favorite person. And speaking from my own personal experience, um, the habits towards anxiety and worry follow this pattern really strongly. I can feel almost the same habitual level of anxiety and worry about some trivial commitment that I have that is in the near future as I can to something that maybe feels a bit more justified. It took me many years to kind of notice it. Notice that was less about the objects and more about the emotional patterning. And I think my life as a monk has been very useful in highlighting that, because we go through various seasons in our monastic life. There's times where there's work going on in the monastery and we're busier. There's times where you have a sangha office or some sort of responsibility in the monastery that maybe is a bit busier. Then there's times where you're on retreat or the whole community's on retreat. And then there's times where you're living with a lot of people and in a monastery where there's a lot more activity and busyness. And then other times you find yourself living with the utmost simplicity, with a great measure of solitude and silence. Probably more so than a normal life, whatever a normal life is these days, but certainly like a normal family life where you have a committed relationship with a partner and a family and a job. There's much more variation um, in the forest monasteries because of the priority on practice and cultivation and the seeking of beneficial environments and conditions to help support that process. We go back and forth between different situations, and when you're in retreat or in living in solitude with great simplicity, and you see the very same patterns, and you start feeling in many of the very same ways that you do when you're in the thick of it in a bigger community with a lot of responsibilities or a lot of activities. It really highlights that the problem is not the world, and that the objects of anxiety and worry and fear are ultimately not the source, or not the problem. The problem is much closer to home. So it can be an interesting exercise to begin to kind of investigate this, arouse a healthy sense of curiosity, and be a bit skeptical about the part of the mind and the part of the story that wants to hang it on the object, whether it's another person or the environment you're in or the relationships that you have. Environment is a factor. It is a big part of the basket of causes and conditions that arouse things, but ultimately we're responsible for understanding how these troublesome emotions lead to dukkha, and how it is that we can resolve those habits to live free from fear, free from anxiety, free from worry, free from frustration. And in the fullest uh, expression of that, independent of causes and conditions, like for the Buddha or for the Arahant, truly transcendent. Just imagine that. Imagine living in a world where there is no one who can make you angry or fearful or anxious or depressed. That would be peace. That would be true freedom. Do you sometimes talk to the Buddha? If so, how do we do that? Could we do that as if we were talking to God, knowing He is not one, of course? Well, while there are probably thousands, even hundreds of thousands of Buddhists who maybe do talk to the Buddha, I don't. Kind of grounded in the Pali Canon, we take it that the Buddha has passed on into parinibbana, and that neither gods nor humans experience him. So this is the Gautama Buddha. So I don't talk to the Buddha. I can imagine what the Buddha might think about my life or some course of action or course of thought or something. Or sometimes I imagine what Ajahn Chah would think about the contents of my mind, which sometimes can be a skillful means to arouse an extra burst of motivation or energy to resolve unskillful thoughts. So, yeah, I don't know how we would do that. I mean, you could personify the Buddha, but I would be clear about the reality of what you're doing there is creating some sort of skillful means. But it's not something I practice with. The most practical of questions. How many cords of firewood do you need per annum? It depends how cold the winter is, and to a certain extent how long it is. But maybe 3 cords of wood? One winter we burnt maybe close to 5. And Christine, thank you for coming and joining us. It was wonderful. I too had a great time on Saturday. It was just a lovely day. So nice to see old friends and meet a few new ones, as Debbie says here. Do you have any recommendations for keeping the 8th precept on upasika days? I tried and failed last night. Everything else worked. I'm curious, Zuri, what precept you failed in. But maybe that's not to be shared publicly. Taking it as a day of retreat and setting up environment and conditions to help support that would be my suggestions. Also, I wouldn't think of it, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on it being a success-fail endeavor. The Buddha's intention for encouraging the lay people to take up the 8 precepts for the Uposatha day was so that they can practice living with the morality and the standards of the Buddhas. So, it's like the taking up of some extra level of simplicity and renunciation. Which can be very supportive of like a day-long retreat, which it's generally meant to be. And also just so many spiritual traditions have something like a fast or something like a occasional practice of relinquishing something for a period of time. And it can be great practice. Are you allowed to exercise as a monk? Can you do yoga or other physical activities or sports? Yes, we can exercise. It's one of the reasons why the Buddha encouraged the monks to do walking meditation. And in the time of the Buddha, the monks walked a lot. They weren't to use vehicles, animal-drawn vehicles or even human-drawn vehicles. So the primary mode of transportation was walking. And unless sick or there's some exceptional cause, monks and nuns walked everywhere. But yeah, we can do, there's no rule against doing yoga or some physical activities. We don't engage in sport, though. When you cut wood or trees, is that killing trees and thus going against the precepts? So, well, part of monastic precepts forbid the monks from damaging plant life, and that would include cutting a live tree. And it seems that the notion of there's kind of a spectrum of what's recognized as a living being. And trees and plants aren't living beings, but there were some sensibilities around them being a type of being. So it doesn't fall under the precept of killing. The delineation for the precept around taking the life of other living creatures is focused on animals, insects, things that have breath, and things that are discernible with the human eye. But there are many views in the thought world of the Buddha about beings, and some of what informs how the Buddha laid down the precepts for the monks is for the monastic community to be living in a way that aroused faith and didn't cause any friction with society. And there was a whole culture around what would be suitable or proper for somebody intent on enlightenment and deep spiritual training, what would be proper for them in the world. And so those are some of the considerations that seem to have gone into this prohibition for the monastics not to damage plants. But it's not killing, and there's no harm there for somebody who hasn't taken higher ordination. What are the traditions and practices for the end of Vassa? Could we lay people do anything to offer anything for the monastics for the end of Vassa from far away? Well, Shraddha, they vary from country to country. The traditions and practices for the monks at the end of the Vassa, there's a very interesting and unique ceremony that we do in lieu of our normal recitation and some of the rule summary, which is called the patimokkha. So every full moon and new moon, the monks are compelled to gather together and confess any outstanding offenses and declare purity to one another. And one of the monks is to recite the rule summary. This is called the patimokkha recitation. And if you have more than 3 monks living in one area together or in a monastery, then they need to do that every full moon and new moon. The end of the Vassa, at the end of the Vassa, they don't do that. They have a special ceremony called the Pavarana, where you give invitation for feedback and criticism for anything seen, done, or suspected that might not be in line with Dhamma Vinaya. So because this was the most stable time of the year for the monastics, they were committed to living in one place for at least 3 months with other monastics. There's maybe more contact and more of a chance to kind of get to know one another or have some sensibility for how others are living and practicing and abiding by the monastic rule and also practicing Dhamma properly. So the Buddha allowed for a special ceremony called the Pavarana ceremony, where you formally sort of invite the other monastics you've been living with for admonition and feedback. So that's a very important tradition for the monastics. Then after that, there's a relaxation of some of the rules so that the monks can travel about and accept offerings of cloth more freely, because it was the time of the season where people were making cloth, and it became known as the robe season. Whether it was the robe season in the society at large or just for the monastics, I'm not quite sure. But there's traditions around the monks being able to travel around and collect donations of cloth so that they could have enough to put robes together. And our understanding is cloth was very precious in that day and age. So although sometimes somebody of means or wealth might offer enough cloth for a whole robe, it seems like oftentimes the monks gathered smaller donations of cloth and then would sew those together into a robe. So those are the traditional things that happen in modern day Thailand when the Vassas end. When the Vassa ends, the monks, because they're free from this commitment to stay in one place, they often do start to travel a bit more. So some of the monks that want to live in different places or wander from place to place or live in the forest, pick up that practice. And the weather becomes quite suitable for that once things start drying out in Thailand. In the Ajahn communities, there tends to be a lot of visiting teachers and paying respects and visiting other monasteries. And there's these Katina festivals that happen at all the different monasteries, which are focused on the offering of robes, robe cloth, and requisites for the monastery. And it becomes a bit like, I always thought of it as a fall festival because the weather and the season in Thailand is a little bit like fall. And it's a time to visit each other's monasteries. And so there's a lot of monastery festivals going on, and both monastics and lay people are attending these different festivals. So it's time for like reconnecting with the broader community and monastic teachers and monastic friends. Could we lay people do or offer anything for the monastics at the end of Vassa from far away? It is possible. I mean, we have a Dana coordinator and we have a website, but we're quite well supported with the requisites of our life. So there's no great need. We have regular needs because we don't use money and whatnot. But dear Ajahn, how to deal with self-hatred that arises for taking poor decisions that led one into challenging circumstances, such as a toxic environment for which one was not ready. Forgive yourself, Samrit. The past is a memory. If you could have made a better decision, if the causes and conditions for that were there, you would have. But they weren't, so you didn't. And it's past. Don't over-personalize it and don't dwell on it. Just forgive yourself and move forward and retain any lessons about how to be a bit more careful and heedful in the future so that maybe you won't make what you're terming here a poor decision. But it's hard to know sometimes what we're getting into. And it's a lot of work to be scrupulous and heedless and check everything out. So, but my advice would be, don't hate yourself. Don't waste any time. Forgive yourself and let go of it. Nothing can be done about it. It's in the past, and everyone makes mistakes. This kind of over-personalization that we engage in is a real source of suffering. Imagining that you could have been better, should have been better. You're worried that most other people wouldn't have made such a foolish choice, which is probably not true. We all make bad choices. Okay, friends, I'm going to leave it at that. So, hope everybody has a good Monday. And thinking back to last week and thinking back to my calendar this week, may we all share a week that is a bit bit more light and spacious, and devote a little bit more time to some silence and solitude and simplicity. And no wood moving. Give our muscles a chance to rest. So, be well, friends. I will see you tomorrow morning. Bye for now.